Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Imperator Rome. I'm Lord Forwind, here with a guide for Macedon. We're going to cover basically how to survive as Macedon, starting with the opening war with the Antigonids, rough expansion plans, and just general the strength of the kingdom and its many weaknesses. First off, the biggest weakness is it is definitely one of the weaker successors. The only weaker one is probably Thrace. You do not start in a particularly strong position as Macedon, even though you have what was the start of Alexander's father's Philip's land. You're surprisingly weak. So, obviously, the first major threat will come in less than a year or so from the Antigonids. He's going to invade, they're going to invade, and they're going to try and wipe you out. The biggest threat is going to come from this right here, led by Demetrius. Demetrios, or however you say it. He is a very powerful commander for his father. He's very skilled. He's got 12 martial skill, and he's going to be leading their legion. So the first moves you have to make are to counteract that. So when you start off, you will have one decision available to expand the Thalosis gold mines. I do not recommend you take this early on. It will cost you 100 gold. That will be much better spent hiring mercenaries and preparing for the inevitable war that will cause you trouble. So things you can do from the start that I recommend you do before you unpause. If you can, try and get an alliance with both Thrace and Epirus. Now, why do you want to ally both of these? Well, Thrace is his fellow successor. But the big thing is both Thrace and Epirus will come to your aid when the Antigonids attack, and that will add a significant amount to your strength. Otherwise, it's just you and your You do have some feudatories, but you actually have several tribal vassals who will not help you. So you'll have two feudatories try and resist the Antigonids' dozens of feudatories and tributaries. Their whole nation. They're going to have an endless swarm of cheap feudatory armies. So allying to both Thrace and Epirus will help prevent that. Epirus obviously is led at the start by Pyrrhus. He can sometimes keep the throne, sometimes he'll lose the throne, but regardless, it'll bring like 5,000-6,000 troops to your cause. And Thrace up here does have some feudatories, most of which are disloyal. Odrissa, as a matter of fact, will revolt. You'll get into that war, but it'll periodically start and end, so you don't have to worry too much about it. But more importantly, they will keep the Antigonids busy on this front for some time, which is exactly what you need. And because they will be called to your defense in a war, the Antigonids will not be able to declare a legacy of Alexander type war and take their provinces immediately. That will only work on yours, which means their provinces will tie up the Antigonids' armies the best they can, and more importantly, they will take care of most of the Antigonids' feudatories. The real trick to surviving as Macedon is waiting till Antigonus himself dies. He will start dying a couple years in the game. If you can keep a hold of both, if you can hold Corinthos, or you can take a couple of the Antigonids' lands, at his death, his entire kingdom will collapse and you'll be given pockets of land. You seem to be given this area down here, sometimes land up here. It seems to be semi-random, but the key is to survive that. So how do we do that? Well, first off, for our ideas, you probably want to do either morale, which is very useful, or there could be an argument made for army morale recovery, in the sense that you will probably be losing several fights, and this will get your armies back into the fray faster. This, on the other hand, will make your army stronger at the start, so it's kind of up to you which you want to take. Let's see, in terms of omens, you want to save popping a omen here until the war starts, and you probably want to take Heracles here for the 5% discipline. That will make your army significantly harder to defeat. They'll take less damage. It means you can definitely go toe-to-toe with a larger, superior army. Other things to do is you will start a mission called Antipatos. I can't say these names, so I'll just say my best. Antipatos. Once you start it, you do get a national spirit, which I will point out, which gives loyalty of subject states and reduce monthly tyranny. The monthly tyranny is actually the better thing here. It basically means you can consistently invoke devotio, which will reduce your war exhaustion. So basically, when you're at war, your war exhaustion is going to go up pretty quickly because you'll have occupations and fights. Definitely make sure to keep triggering this. Negative 20 is huge. It's definitely one of the largest ones you can get. However, once you start the mission, you'll get a series of events, a series of missions, one of which you can take at the beginning, which will cost you 1,500 manpower. This province here will no longer produce precious metals. Instead, it will produce wood. You can keep it producing metal, but there's a huge penalty, so I advise you change it. But more importantly, you get 400 gold. This is basically, this mountain had tons of gold, which helped finance Alexander and Philip's campaigns. However, it's almost not there. So you can keep the supply steady, but it adds slaves needed for local surplus plus 15, which is not very useful. And as a matter of fact, the extra 400 gold will prove to be more useful. What you will use that gold for once that is done is to hire a mercenary army, or more than one. You can probably hire these guys. It will be costing you gold each month, which is why you want a large influx of gold to be able to keep it up for several years. It's important to note now, with the recent patch, disbanding mercenaries no longer costs a lump sum, which is an amazing change that I'm glad Paradox did. It basically will allow you to get rid of mercenaries for free, which means you can run almost down to no gold before getting rid of them. In the short run, though, you probably want to hire at least one of these merc armies prior to that and put them down here on your border with all the other Greeks. But you also want to max out your legion. I'm pretty sure maxing out the legion's better here than using the levy, even though you do get your king as a commander and he's 10 marshal. He's stuck with a lot of light infantry, so you're almost better off picking up a legion that you can then put, quite a bit of heavy infantry in and stuff. Your legion, though, is probably not going to be able to beat the Antigonids, which is why you'll need the mercs to back you up in battle. It's also why if Pyrrhus comes to your aid, Epirus here, they will also keep them busy. Your goal is to really get this one province up here, Chalkis. It will... Oops, sorry, for some reason I thought that was a mission. If you can take it, but remember, if you'll be in a legacy war, so that you'll be able to take it instantly if you occupy it, it will get you morale and siege ability, and then that will open up further down this mission. I haven't had much success completing these missions. You basically have to kick out all the other successors and have several subjects that have at least 3 territories, which means you almost need them to conquer land and then subject them, which gets a little confusing. You can definitely get Sparta, and you can usually get Athens under your control easily. So I guess the other target would be Argos here, in hopes they don't lose land. And then you can trigger that, and you will basically... You can give up your lands to create a feudatory here that will own all these lands and be loyal to you, which, of course, feudatories are very useful, but it's really up to you if you want that. This is another one that if the Antigonids have collapsed, you can pay 50 gold and you will get Athens to join you as a feudatory. I recommend you do this when this event comes up. A free feudatory on the size of Athens of 5 or 6 provinces is really good. This, however, once you do this mission, you'll unlock this one, the last of the Argids, which is Alexander and Philip's bloodline. Be aware that you will get 50% cheaper cost to deify the rulers, clearly to incentivize you to trigger deifying your ruler. Be aware, though, and this is something that got me a couple times, that if you try and deify a ruler, the ruler performing the deification must belong to a family with at least 800 prestige. Now, if we look at the family, here, you only start with 250, which means you can't really do it for your first 1 or 2 rulers. So it's kind of a trick here. Don't take this too early or you'll waste it. Once you do complete that, you'll get this one, which is kind of nice. You'll fortify it, but it comes so late, it's not great. If you have other time, you can worry about invading this area here and going down this mission tree. Subdue them. You can usually peacefully get Epirus as a subject once you grow a bit. They're not a very large nation. You improve relations, you can usually feudatory them. You can continue down. This one's kind of cool. You can uplift or annex them. I honestly recommend annexing them rather than uplifting them, because then that will give you access to fabricate claims and go north. Yeah, and then you can get some light infantry offense for the rest of the game, which is useful. And formalizing the monarchy is really nice, but you have to wait at least 2 generations to do it, and it's nothing amazing. It does unlock other mission stuff, but it's not overwhelmingly strong. So we've already gone over basically raise your army, get mercs, get extra money, prep for the war, ally Thrace, ally Epirus. If you're crazy, you could try and see about getting alliance with the other successors. That's almost impossible, though. But you could poke around and see other nations. Sparta tends to want to join you. That Sparta tends to be your next best one. They'll tie up people. You could ally a tribal nation up here if you just need more troops. But honestly, Sparta will divert attention from you, and they're a prime candidate to make a feudatory later on because they have a unique spirit. They're pretty strong, pretty large. They're pretty good. The issue is when the war starts, Demetrius here of the Antigonids is going to basically smash right through your territory to here, or he'll go south to Corinthos. It's very hard to beat him. Like, I had to have an army plus mercs to beat him, and even then I needed help. He's a very powerful ruler. Thrace will probably tie them up here. Your goal is to keep them from occupying at least your way up to here to Pella. You do not want to lose your capital. You also don't want to lose this province here, Methone. Methone has a great wonder, the Palace of the Argids, which basically means your subjects will pretty much always be loyal, and if you have tributaries, you get extra money from them. This is a really strong wonder because it allows you to get subjects very easily and keep them. But the goal is to hold that land, those 2-3 provinces at worst, until the Antigonids collapse. Usually Egypt will invade and conquer this area. The Seleucids will invade and conquer this. If you get really lucky, you manage to beat Demetrius's army here, and then you can invade here. Remember, the cool thing is, since this will be a legacy war, any province you take, you will occupy immediately. And if it's in a new region, it will give you a new levy to raise. So periodically keep checking your raised levies. Once you start taking land, because of that raised levy, when you take new land, you can very quickly start a wave of new troops to keep pushing the border further, getting you more troops. It's a strategy that works really well with the successors, but in the case of Macedon is even more critical. They do struggle with that a bit. In terms of innovations, so you've got roughly 2 choices here. You could go to plan for the first war, which is basically get the military stuff as fast as you can. Or you could say, I'm not going to go too hard on the military, rely on my allies, and instead start prepping oratory advances in hopes of getting down here to improve opinions, at which point then you'll be able to feudatory basically all of Greece pretty easily, making your empire grow faster. So you have two routes. If you're going to go military, you want as much discipline as you can pull up, basically. So active drill, professional training. If you can get elite recruitment standards for 5% heavy infantry discipline, but you're probably going to be better off jumping over here to Manipular Legion. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 over here, because that'll get you another discipline here. So that would use up all of your 8 starting innovations. The other option is you don't take this one and instead take sapping, which will increase your siege ability, or you could take fort defense. Those are what I recommend you start with. Later on, you're going to obviously want to go down civic, the left tree here, to get money. Oratory, you definitely want to get legal patronage. For some reason, the Macedonians seem to be relatively disloyal in my games, which is an odd struggle to keep them happy. The key things going down here is you definitely want to snag stuff like transferred citizenship and aggressive protection. Just you add those with the Palace of the Argids, and you're going to basically have permanently loyal subjects who will join you in all the wars. But if you want to do a subject or a feudatory swarm, you go this way. You spend 1, 2, 3, 4. You actually go for this one over this one. 5, 6, 7, 8, you get to the first one. Or if you don't want to take this initial one, which is really good, the plus 20 is huge, you can take a divert. You can divert yourself here to get some additional maximum research efficiency and an additional diplomatic relations slot, which will help with alliances and stuff. In terms of your diplomatic stance, it might be a good idea to change your stance to something like appeasing or something, or mercantile, but you definitely want to be on this bellicose stance during the war with the Antigonids, because every province you take will give you aggressive expansion, and this will obviously help with that. It'll reduce it by 10%. Now, interestingly enough, when you start out the game, your current ruler has the blood of Antipatos, the ruler's father. He's got a unique bloodline, which is really cool, but more importantly is his wife, who has Alexander's bloodline. And Alexander's bloodline is definitely the strongest bloodline. Stability, aggressive expansion, legitimacy, martial score. It's really powerful. You combine the two and it's amazingly strong. You have good rulers. So your starting ruler doesn't start with it, but his heir does. So this guy, Philippos, if he lives to becoming ruler, he's in a great position to become a strong ruler and keep these bloodline going. Be aware that while Alexander's bloodline can be passed on through women or men, Antipatos' can only be passed on patrilineally, which means you cannot change away from agnatic primogeniture or agnatic cogenic here. Because if you do, you'll have a chance of a woman inheriting with familial or elective succession, and then you will lose the bloodline in your ruler, and you want to keep it in your ruler. It's a huge benefit. I don't like agnatic seniority. It tends to have too many rulers die. So probably swap to this one. It's much better to have at least some ruler of Alexander's bloodline than have no ruler, or have a new ruler with neither bloodline. But you definitely want to stick with one of those two at the beginning to keep that. In the long run, moving forward, you definitely want to get conversion policies. If you start conquering things outside of the Greek lands, it will be more useful. That, of course, is located under religious, under prescribed canon. You also want to snag the Great Temple from open religion, and, of course, the Great Theater from gradual economic integration under the oratory. Thankfully, if you go to do a feudatory subject swarm, you'll automatically pick that one up. In terms of which of these to take your policy, it's much easier to do religious conversion than cultural. But be aware, if you're just focusing on conquering Greece, for which there is an achievement, you don't have to worry about religious conversion because they're all Hellenic. In fact, most of this area is Hellenic. So you could honestly start cultural and then switch to religious when you start to invade tribal nations or you conquer the Antigonids. It's kind of up to what you pick. I will make a special note down here. Institutional benevolence combined with your starting wonder, and if you take any innovations, will keep your subjects loyal. But down here, King of Kings, once you have 100 territories, the +2 diplomatic relation slots is nice, but the integration speed, if you want to start annexing your feudatories, is not to be overlooked. It's hard to get integration speed, so just be aware that thing exists. At some point, you'll be able to deify a ruler, obviously using the mission, and once you have 800 prestige, which will take a couple generations, it's up to you which of these you take. I don't recommend you do the deity of war, though, because if you manage to conquer Alexandria, you will get the Alexander, the deified ruler of Alexander as a god, and he is a really good deity of war. If you're lucky, one of the other successors may have completed a mission that will deify their rulers, in which case they will tend to replace Zeus. So you could conceivably consider doing Hermes, Zeus, or I don't know if you can actually deify a male ruler as Aphrodite, but you could try that. Aphrodite might not be the best one of these. In terms of growth, Demeter or Demeter is much better because she will grow your population. So kind of up to you. Other things to note, Pella is a fairly goodly populated city. However, it is in fact maxed out on building slots at the beginning of the game. So before you take any innovations, you probably want to spend some of your starting political influence improving it. I actually like doing the expanded local building slots because then you don't have to delete any of these buildings. If you were to delete any of these buildings, I would honestly probably get rid of 1 or 2 of the tax offices. Yes, the tax is nice, but until they patch tax to make it stronger or equivalent to commerce, commerce is always stronger. So obviously turn on automatic trading, make sure your trade routes in all your provinces are either automatic or you do them manually. But you want to try and build some academies, get some more nobles, get some more population. Thankfully, you start with courts of law, so you have more citizens. But your starting region here, I will point this out, has 5 cities in it, which makes this an ideal spot for building a very good trading, but also develop cities, so lots of academies. You can basically make this area generate enough research for a world-spanning empire if you do it correctly. Obviously, you could improve some of these other provinces, make them cities as well. It's really up to you. Just keep an eye on the food. But if you got trade routes or if you conquer Egypt, not an issue. Obviously, spend money on trade routes. This is a pretty good region for trade goods, and you'll make a lot of money from them. Let's see, what else? You may want to save some political power during the war to trigger perform divine sacrifice, because as you expand the aggressive expansion, your stability will start taking hits, and obviously you don't want that to fall too low. So you basically want to invoke both of these. Stab some pigs. I have no idea what that image is of. If someone could tell me, that would be cool. Invoke both of those while at war and you'll do better. In terms of after the war with the Antigonids, when they collapse, where do you go? Greece is the big prize. Thankfully, you can do it mostly peacefully, get a lot of the feudatories just with improved relations. You're going to grow from the war with the Antigonids if you survive it. You'll pick up some land, which will push you higher in strength, so people will be more likely to obviously support and join you. If you're really lucky, you manage to get to a great power rank, on which you basically double your size. At which point, feudatoring these guys is really kind of pathetically easy, especially if you get the improved diplomatic relations. For that purpose, you could theoretically make an argument to not do military administration or sanction privileges. I recommend at least sanction privileges. Corruption reduction is huge. But you could pick this one to get plus 33. If you do the innovations, you can very easily feudatory this whole area, at which point you have a unstoppable army of basically brain dead zombies who will just swarm enemies for you. The issue I find with Macedon, though, is you have a very short time to use Legacy of Alexander. You're going to be in a vicious war for some time, and after you win it, you're going to need time to recover and rebuild. Plus, you still will not be strong enough to take on the Seleucids or Egypt unless you get really lucky, which means your next target is probably Thrace. If you're super, super lucky, Thrace either loses land or becomes small enough or willing to become your client. If not, they will sometimes break the alliance with you, or sometimes you need to break the alliance with them. But invading them will get you passage to the east here without war, and you can also pick up a good amount of their feudatories or subjects here. And then, of course, you have access to this whole area. Be aware, invading this area will slow you down. It's easy for the taking, but since it's not Hellenic, converting it and keeping it under control is going to take some time. Might be better to come back when you have more innovations that will help, stuff that give provincial loyalty, conversion, and instead focus on the Greek lands that you can get a hold of. If you're really clever, you can snipe northern Egypt from Egypt. But I wouldn't mess around with the Seleucids, probably during your starting ruler's lifetime or even his successor, because once they gain Syria, they're huge. It's much better to build up your power base in Greece. Be aware that Rome is sitting over here, and hilariously, Rome kind of likes you. If you improve the opinions with Rome as they grow, it's very possible to you to get an alliance with Rome once they conquer southern Italy here, the boot heel. And they prove to be a pretty good anchor. They'll call you into lots of wars. Obviously, you can join them and then just not do anything. but they will help against the successors. And at some point, once they get up here, if you've conquered this land, they will pour tons of troops into your wars. I never had much issue with Rome breaking an alliance with me unless I got to like 80 or 90 aggressive expansion, which is where improving relations is really, really strong with Rome. The improved relation innovations, you can keep them happy. And more importantly, you'll prevent them from invading you. If you're crazy, you can try and invade them, but I really wouldn't recommend it early on, at which point Rome becomes much harder to stop. You're gonna really, this war is tough. Like Macedon, outside of Thrace, Macedon starts probably in the worst successor location, and Thrace isn't far ahead of them because a lot of times the Antigonids invade them. I'll do a Thrace guide too at some point to show you how to survive as them. But suffice to say, these two more often than not get crushed or get beaten up. I can't count the games where I've seen the Antigonids just simply replace Macedon and then reform it themselves. Macedon is a very good nation to try and reunite Alexander's empire from, if you can survive the initial war and gain control of Greece, at which point you basically recreate Alexander's conquest, invade Egypt, the Seleucids, and then India. It's quite fun. If you're going to do it that way, I definitely recommend you go down the oratory tree and grab winning land by the spear, so you get Imperial Challenge. With your subjects, creating an infinite swarm of small armies, that war goal is much easier because they'll occupy the land. Also remember that raising levies when you take land can be really strong. After the recent patch, however, and I'll stick this here, I'm going to do a video on it probably, it's no longer worthwhile to raise your levies, wait 4 months, and disband them. Paradox changed that, so your levies have to be up for 8 months, and after 6 months you start accruing war exhaustion, which means you're going to suffer 2 months of war exhaustion before you get military tradition. It's not to say it doesn't work, it's just slower. It's a very good way. Raise them, keep them up for 8 months, disband your levies, especially if you snag the innovations under Marshall here that give you starting experience. You snag all these, you put them all together, and basically you can blow through the Greek kingdom tradition trees and the Greek city traditions. Some important things to note. The Greek kingdom tree is kind of interesting because it gives you stuff that involve conquest and heavy infantry. If you can get down here, mercenary army maintenance is really strong. However, you do have limited mercenaries now, so be careful which ones you pick. This one, however, to get to that, you have to get through a Persian one, which basically means you need to conquer. The closest land is Syria, get Aramaic, and then you can do this. But the Greek Republic tree, in fact, will probably have more things to help you at the beginning. The starting one will give you recruit mercenary costs cheaper and morale of armies, which is probably what you're going to be using. Mercenaries and small armies at the beginning, making this probably the best starting one. Heavy infantry offense here is really good, as is the increased fort and fort capacity. After that point, it mainly degenerates into light infantry, archers, and other stuff. This one deserves a note down here, both of these. Cheaper heavy infantry maintenance, which is nice, but not huge. But this one, mountain and hills combat bonus, is quite strong. It really helps with your conquest of like Persia and stuff, if you can get it. The Greek tradition one, sadly, I don't find as useful. Obviously, it's worth grabbing the heavy infantry offense, morale, and having the abilities to found military colonies and get the siege ability. But after that, you got a lot of ships and a lot of cavalry. It's worth having cavalry, but making whole armies as cavalry as the Greeks kind of seems like a waste because they get their really strong heavy infantry. Outside of that, I will point out the fact you do start off with a pretty good navy here. It's worth putting a good commander in charge of it and then basically put them to hunt fleets. I've had them manage to sink a lot of the Antigonids on crossing. It'll basically prevent Demetrius down here from getting any reinforcements outside of the Greek city-states, who will, of course, assist him. But it will make life a lot easier for you. That means they'll have to go through Thrace. Right up here, you've got 2 forts. It's a great spot to smash any armies. You'll probably lose these 2 provinces, but you can hold these, march around, They will have to march back. They can't just jump between forts. It's really awesome. And it can be worth it in the short run if you're worried about it strengthening your forts in this region. Just be aware you do have a fort infrastructure capacity thing. Throwing a fort down here isn't a miss either. It will slow Demetrius down if he manages to beat you in a fight here. Enough for you to regroup and march off to beat him. After you win the initial wars, it plays like any of the other successors, so I'm not going to go any more into that. You do get some great missions. Be sure to keep checking on them and completing them. And you don't have really any unique decisions. This gold mine you'll want to do at some point. It will help. I haven't managed to ever really get this province developed high, but you could move slaves there to produce more precious metals if you really want to. So anyway, that is a guide on how to play Macedon and my tips to surviving. Get the extra gold from that mission, raise some merc armies, try and smash Demetrius. By that I mean beat him, chase him down if you can, and wipe out his army. Don't let him rebuild. If he rebuilds, he's got elephants, he's really strong. This army will be improved before the AI attacks you. It is a very tough opening war. Even if you lose this land here, don't be too worried, because once their kingdom collapses, they are pathetically weak. They'll have like 10 provinces, and you can pick them off later. The key is to survive the first war. If you can, win it, but I say most of you should focus on just surviving. So anyway, best of luck. You've got a couple achievements. Unite Greece. Obviously, reunite Alexander's empire stuff. And it's a fun country. The start has gotten really tough, though. So best of luck. And I'll see you guys all in another video. Bye for now.